The bystander effect. We normally see it during anti-bullying campaigns, student-made projects for psychology, or on the news when somebody dies with 40 witnesses. So what's the big deal with the bystander effect? Why does it happen? What is it? And what on earth does this have to do with society? The bystander effect is a deep social issue that came into the spotlight after the death of Kitty Genovese. Kitty Genovese was stabbed outside of her apartment building in New York City by Winston Moseley on March 13th, 1964. The unfortunate part of the attack that gained the attention of the media was that there were a lot of witnesses to the murder. An investigation by police and prosecutors after the death showed that approximately a dozen individuals nearby had heard or seen portions of the attack. It was originally reported by the New York Times that there were 38 witnesses. Two of the witnesses, Joseph Fink and Carl Ross, were aware of the actual attacks. Joseph Fink was aware that she was stabbed in the first attack, and Carl Ross was aware of the stabbing in the second attack. Genovese arrived home at about 3:15 a.m. She walked towards her apartment when Moseley exited his vehicle and approached Genovese with a knife. She ran across the parking lot and towards the front of her building. However, Moseley ran after her and stabbed her twice in the back. Many were entirely unaware that the assault or homicide was in progress, and at the end of the attack, Genovese screamed, "Oh my God, he stabbed me, help me." Several neighbors nearby had heard her cry, but few of them actually recognized it as a cry for help. When Robert Mosier, one of the neighbors, shouted at the attacker, "Let that girl alone," which doesn't make any grammatical sense. At this point, you would assume that a normal person would help the victim after, shouting at the attacker. But Kitty Genovese crawled out of sight from witnesses, and they went back to their own business. Moseley left, but he came back 10 minutes later to finish the job. Our friend Carl Ross called the police, then arrived shortly after. An ambulance came at around 4:15 a.m., the last place she would be before she died. However, thanks to the New York Times, this was blown way out of proportion when they published an article about the attack, stating that there were about 38 witnesses. This horrified the public as to why 38 law-abiding citizens didn't call the police during a 35-minute attack. This gained traction in the psychological studies community, where two social psychologists, John M. Darley and Bib Latane, conducted studies on the bystander effect. So what exactly did they find? Some of the first steps in anyone's decision to help is seeing that somebody needs help. The way we most commonly do this is by observing the reactions of others in our environment. We normally don't want to go around being heroes unless we don't have to, unless we don't have superpowers, because that'd be really cool. So instead, we assess the situation to see how others react. For Darley and Latane, they had two sets of participants complete a questionnaire, and after a few minutes, smoke would pour into the room underneath the door. One set included single individuals who were left in the room alone, and the other one had 3 participants. One of them was completely unaware of the fact, and 2 of them were paid to keep calm no matter what. The results showed that when the participants were alone, 75% of them left the room to go look for help. But when there were 2 other people in the room, only 10% left to go get help. Due to the test subject being alone, they were more likely to act heroic due to the lack of people reacting calm. While when the test subject was with 2 other participants that were reacting calm, they assumed everybody else is okay with it, so they should be too. This is what's called pluralistic ignorance, which is a fancy word, but breaking it down basically means that multiple people think that other people are okay, so they should be okay too, even though nobody in that entire group actually thinks they're okay. We cope in this in all sorts of different trivial situations, like asking the teacher for help in class, or not doing it as to not look stupid. Or vice versa, when everybody raises their hand, so you raise your hand, as to not look stupid. This also happens when, a large group of people clog up the hallway and nobody asks them to move, which is super irritating. The next thing that Darley and Latane found is diffusion of responsibility. This is fancy psychological language for the more people there are, the less responsible you feel, which also ties into a neat little bow with pluralistic ignorance. So it basically goes like this. If you are the only person in the area, 100% of the responsibility is yours. But if you're one of 2 people in the area, 50% of the responsibility is yours. If you're one of 3, 33%, one of 4, 25%. You get the gist. This is you diffusing the responsibility amongst your peers. In these situations, people assume that somebody else will help or somebody better qualified will help. Take in consideration this video. "20 minutes this guy sat there acting in pain. Nobody helped. This would be a serious problem if he wasn't an actor and that was actually somebody in pain." So, diffusion of responsibility and pluralistic ignorance are major contributions to the bystander effect. However, factors can play a role, such as social class, environment, and location. If you're a wealthy-looking man in a safe environment and wealthy people, a wealthy area, you're much more likely to get help. Say in the second part of this video. Really rich people, you can't help a poor dude in pain, but a depressed rich guy, you immediately need help. Otherwise, it'd be a horrible human being, right? Moving on. Bystander effect is a huge problem for society in several reasons. Q Genovese isn't the only case of bystander effect that ended up with death. Taken into account, in October 2011, a 2-year-old girl, Wang Yu, was hit by a white van in China. Then, after 18 bystanders walked around her to the point where they actually did look at her walk around, another truck came and hit her. Several minutes after the second truck hit her, a cycler finally found her, picked her up, and tried to get help. She died 8 days later. In April 2016, Amy Anita Joyner Francis, 16-year-old girl, died after getting into a fight with a girl over a boy. A gang of bullies jumped her, slammed her head against a bathroom sink. There were multiple bystanders, and people also recorded the event, which is horrible. She was later found in critical condition and was rushed by a police helicopter to the hospital in which she died. In April 2010, Hugo Alfredo Taliax was stabbed to death in New York City after aiding a woman who was being attacked by a thief. Yax laid on the sidewalk for an hour before firefighters arrived, and to the point where 25 people kind of watched him as he lay dying on the sidewalk. One, in fact, took pictures of him. Took pictures of a dying man on the sidewalk. None of them helped or called for emergency services. The fact that so many people can die, but not by the hands of a criminal, but by their own peers, is horrifying. We spend so much of our time with people, yet we can actively be killed by it. By failing to help each other in need, we ruin ourselves as human beings. This kind of thought breeds apathy, which can make us as humans disconnected from one another. We constantly rely on each other for attention, happiness, and safety. will slowly shell away from each other, the very thing that makes us an effective species, and remove ourselves from society, becoming disconnected and alone. Which, this in itself is ironic, considering the bystander effect is due to society not caring, so because society doesn't care, we think we shouldn't care, and it will be a gruesome cycle until everybody just doesn't care anymore. As Alfred Einstein said, the world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch without doing anything. However, all is not lost. There are several ways we can break this cycle, and many have others have already started. From laws put in place by several governments, such as the Good Samaritan laws by China, which they put in place after the death of Wang Yu. Quebec put in place a Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, and our very own US has Good Samaritan laws. This can protect us from, in general, people not helping one another. General compassion can also help. We can stop this problem before it even begins. So, by just being aware of the bystander effect, we already completed the first step in solving it. Another way we can solve the bystander effect is instead of calling for general help, like, hey, someone help me, single out somebody, because if you single out somebody, it becomes personal. And instead of being in a room with dozens of people, it becomes a room with 2 people, and that person's more inclined to help. With it, more people will follow and help. Next time you see a person that's in dire need, just remember it's better to save somebody and possibly look stupid than to ignore them and they die because you did nothing.